The video game industry has hit a reckoning point. Back in late 2017, when the whole Star Wars Battlefront 2 mess occurred, I knew the day of anti-loot box legislation in the United States was inevitable because this gaming industry can't seem to understand the predatory anti-consumer monetization that has made Take-Two Interactive, Electronic Arts, and Activision Blizzard billion-dollar companies is not sustainable. There's valid arguments that can be made against government regulation, but at the same time, this is an industry that has had multiple chances in years to change their ways, but I'd argue things are getting worse. Days ago, it was announced by Missouri Senator Josh Hawley the Protecting Children from Abusive Games Act, a proposed bill that is intended to ban the exploitation of children through pay-to-win and loot box monetization practices by the video game industry. As Hawley said in a press release, when a game is designed for kids, game developers shouldn't be allowed to monetize addiction, and when kids play games designed for adults, they should be walled off from compulsive microtransactions. Game developers who knowingly exploit children should face legal consequences. Now, in my recent video discussing this news, I emphasized that the Entertainment Software Association, the lobbyist group working on behalf of most of these big gaming companies, would fight this hard. And that's exactly what has already started to happen. In a statement, the ESA said, "Numerous countries, including Ireland, Germany, Sweden, Denmark, Australia, New Zealand, and the United Kingdom, determined that loot boxes do not constitute gambling. We look forward to sharing with the Senator the tools and information the industry already provides that keeps the control of in-game spending in parents' hands. Parents already have the ability to limit or prohibit in-game purchases with easy-to-use parental controls." And furthermore, today, ESA Chief Executive Officer and President Stanley Pierre Lewis had this to say to GamesIndustry.biz regarding the concerns over loot boxes and the proposed legislation by Senator Josh Hawley. "We as an industry provide consumers with the most robust information about the games they play and the tools to manage how these games get played. As an organization that advocates for industry, particularly in the legislative forum, we always look for opportunities and have taken the opportunities to share with Senator Hawley and others about the great work we already provide. And as they learn more, they see our industry understands its responsibility to consumers and takes it seriously." Now, both of those statements are pretty much BS, and I'd argue this industry has done a very poor job at handling this issue. Research, as I mentioned in my last video, is starting to come out confirming what many of us already know. Loot boxes are psychologically manipulative. I mean, they're basically slot machines, people. But as Australian investigators Dr. David Zendel and Dr. Paul Carnes uncovered late last year from nearly 7,500 individuals, our large-scale study found important links between loot box spending and problem gambling. The more severe a gamer's problem gambling was, the more likely they were to spend large amounts of money on loot boxes. These results strongly support claims that loot boxes are psychologically akin to gambling. Now, the ESA, who represents gaming publishers that include Bethesda, Activision Blizzard, Electronic Arts, Take-Two Interactive, Square Enix, Sony, Xbox, Nintendo, Konami, Ubisoft, Epic Games, and many more, don't care about that research because loot boxes and pay-to-win microtransactions are a revenue avenue that they all wish to keep open. I will say it's funny to me that many of these executives find it a controversial idea to sell cosmetic items directly to consumers for a few dollars, what they actually are worth. Something that many of these companies did years ago before discovering the goldmine that is loot boxes, which turns those $5 cosmetics, which maybe even that's a little too much, into something that could net hundreds and sometimes thousands in revenue off of just one consumer. In that first statement coming directly from the ESA, they make a very interesting choice with words, because all these countries haven't exactly said what the ESA claims. For example, New Zealand and the UK in late 2017 said that loot boxes do not meet their legal definition of gambling. Ireland has made their concerns known about loot boxes, but have not said that loot boxes are gambling, although the Irish government is overhauling its gambling laws, so that could change in the future. Sweden is currently investigating loot boxes. In early 2018, the country's Minister for Public Administration told P3 News that loot boxes could be classified as a form of gambling by 2019. A German state just recently announced they are considering new laws against loot boxes and mobile monetization. The ESA also makes sure not to mention countries like the Netherlands and Belgium, who have ruled that some but not all loot boxes violated their laws on gambling. France's gambling regulator has also been very critical of loot boxes, but thus far has stopped short of regulation. But Belgium has by far far been the most aggressive country against loot boxes. In April 2018, the Belgian Gaming Commission looked at Star Wars Battlefront 2, FIFA 18, Overwatch, and Counter-Strike Global Offensive, and found only Star Wars was not in violation of the country's gambling legislation, and that's only because Electronic Arts stripped out the game's loot boxes after its launch debacle. It determined that FIFA 18, Overwatch, and CSGO's loot boxes are a game of chance and so are subject to Belgian gambling law. The publishers behind these specific games were forced to follow the law, but EA was the lone company at first to try and fight the ruling, but eventually surrendered, but not before making clear they disagreed with Belgium, saying, "We seek to bring choice, fairness, value, and fun to our players in all of our games. In addition to providing players options in how they play, we include pack probabilities in our games for the transparency players want to make informed content choices. While we are taking this action, we do not agree with Belgian authorities' interpretation of the law, and we will continue to seek more clarity on the matter as we go forward." Just an FYI, the only reason why pack probabilities have been added to games like FIFA is because some countries, like China, have made it mandatory game companies reveal the odds in packs, which, as we all have found out, in most games, you get the best items for a 0.001% chance, something that many game developers and publishers wish to hide. Now, last year, ESA President Mike Gallagher, who's no longer president, responded to this loot box issue and the decisions made by countries like Belgium by telling GamesIndustry.biz, "When you look at these other decisions, we can't go to the lowest common denominator of government around the world and make that the standard the rest of the world has to live by, and limit the trajectory of the industry. That's not the best approach. Instead, we believe it's best to be clear about the facts and make sure those carry the day around the world so we drive an outcome that best extends the game industry's frontiers and looks after the interests of gamers." He would also further add that he believes as several governments around the world seek to classify loot boxes as gambling, they are taking power away from the industry. Gallagher would specifically say this challenges our industry's freedom to innovate and impairs our ability to continuously test new business models, which drive creativity and engagement with our audiences, which, yes, apparently loot boxes drive creativity, not greed. Anyway, this gaming industry has done its best job at deflecting from the issue that is predatory monetization, and that's because they are making billions of dollars off of these methods yearly. If this proposed anti-loot box bill were to go into law tomorrow, companies like Electronic Arts and Activision Blizzard would be devastated, the most because their whole business relies on these anti-consumer predatory monetization models. Outside of just these two gaming publishers, the mobile market, which is dominated by horrendous business models, would be destroyed. And this may prove to be an unpopular opinion, but I don't really care about companies who exploit consumers' thinking. Of course, there would be severe layoffs at many gaming companies that rely on loot box revenue like EA does with FIFA Ultimate Team, but let's be honest, these companies have implemented and thrived off of unsustainable business practices. Mike Gallagher believed in mid-2018 the answer to this problem was let's inform first, continue to self-regulate, and move ahead that way. It's worked great for us over the last 20 years, that's the prescription we should use going forward. The gaming industry does not want to change, they want the conversation to die out. Gallagher, who is no longer president of the ESA, has made their position obvious, and that is just to let things stay how they are. After the numerous loot box controversies that have occurred over the years, from Star Wars Battlefront 2 to FIFA Ultimate Team to Middle-earth Shadow of War to Black Ops 4, the ESA, or really this whole industry, doesn't feel a need to take responsibility. The only thing that really has happened is this behavior has become normalized, and corporate defenders sit back and claim this isn't that bad, when in reality in the last 10 years we went from outrage over something like this, horse armor, to general acceptance over that nowadays. And now the conversation has shifted to being angry over any and all loot boxes, but in 10 years, how will the average consumer react to that? This is exactly why the industry doesn't want to do anything more than throw a sticker on a game cover that doesn't even specify the difference between a loot box and story DLC. The ESA will never see a problem with monetization because if they do, it will cost them billions in potential revenue. That's exactly why they feel things are best staying how they are, and why they cannot be impartial on this issue, looking out for consumers and gaming companies at the same time, because it's always going to be gaming companies first. What has that gotten gamers? More publishers are jumping on the live service bandwagon, delivering incomplete messes with the promise the $60 game will be good maybe one day. Publishers like Activision Blizzard, who fired 800 employees earlier this year, year have implemented more and more predatory microtransactions into games like Black Ops 4, and have told investors they are just testing the waters right now with their adjustments to the game's loot box system, which is the definition of anti-consumer. Thus far, the ESA has neglected to address the research that finds a link between loot boxes and gambling. As I discussed in my last video, the ESRB, which was founded by the ESA, has described loot boxes like baseball cards. Even now retired Nintendo of America boss Reggie made a similar defense last year. One major gaming publisher not a part of the ESA that has taken the opposite stance is CD Projekt Red, who publicly has called out other gaming companies' greed. But co-founder Marcin Nowinski furthermore in early 2018 said, "The moment players feel you are reaching out for their wallet in any unfair way, they will be vocal about it, and frankly speaking, I think it's good for the industry. Things often look great from a spreadsheet perspective, but decision makers often aren't asking themselves the question of how gamers would feel, or is this offer a fair one? Gamers are striking back, and I really hope this will change our industry for the better." Obviously, I have no idea what CDPR's stance would be on anti-loot box legislation, but they certainly would not be affected as they haven't resorted to predatory monetization like that. The ESA has already started to battle this anti-loot box bill, and this is just the beginning. This specific business model is worth billions, and the ESA will work overtime to stop any sort of regulation in the United States. We already saw how active they were in Hawaii last year, downplaying the importance of this issue.
And for several months, the ESA, the Entertainment Software Association of America, has been flying its lobbyists out to Hawaii. The ESA is the trade organization and lobbying arm of all our favorite companies: EA, Activision, Take-Two, Ubisoft, basically every major player in the gaming industry. The ESA lobbyists have been meeting behind the scenes with legislators.
And ultimately, at least just in Hawaii, the ESA lobbyists defeated those anti-loot box bills early last year. But now in present day, we're dealing with the federal US government looking into law on this issue. Josh Hawley's proposed bill does need to be more specific with what games he's targeting, because the wording in his press release was very broad. He emphasized going after game companies who exploit children. But what specific games are we talking about? Is it just mobile games like Candy Crush or console games like Overwatch? And what about games like Call of Duty, which are rated M for mature and can technically still be purchased by minors who are 17 years of age in the United States? Should games like Call of Duty be forced into getting the dreaded AO rating for adults only? As on the ESRB website, it said content suitable only for adults aged 18 and up may include gambling with real currency. There are definitely games that somehow avoid that rating, like Call of Duty, by implementing gambling-like mechanics, which are pretty much slot machines, and use a virtual currency which cannot be cashed out technically. But even then, there are games like CSGO and PUBG that make it players can profit off of finding unique items and loot boxes, and many players have found easy ways to cash out those funds. But my opinion at this moment is that this gaming industry has earned regulation. Looking at a game like Fallout 76, it was promised only cosmetic microtransactions, but months later, there's gameplay affecting microtransactions, and Bethesda avoids even addressing their lies. Another Bethesda game, The Elder Scrolls Blade, had one of the lead developers saying this.
They make sure it works in that way. And then what is the right amount of time? Like, because people are going to play for a long time probably. Like, we don't want to stop people with timers or things like that.
Yet, the game features timers or paywalls everywhere. There are many more lies that can be brought up from the likes of Activision Blizzard, Electronic Arts, and Take-Two Interactive, but the point is that these gaming companies cannot be trusted to do the right thing. It will be very interesting to see how this whole ESA versus anti-loot box legislation plays out, but so far with how both Democrats and Republicans are raising concerns over in-game monetization, the ESA will be spending major dollars to stop something that I feel is inevitable. Anyway, what is your opinion on this proposed loot box legislation, and what is your response to the defense that the ESA is making? Let me know your thoughts down in the comment section below, but thank you for watching. Make sure to leave a like if you did enjoy this video or found any informative value, and make sure to follow my other social media accounts for updates on new videos. Links are always down in the description below. I'm most active on Twitter, giving opinions on news that I do not always get into video form, so make sure to follow me over there. Also check out my Discord for all sorts of discussion on games, and again, thank you for joining. Consider subscribing for more videos like this, and I'll see you later.